Hello everyone, welcome back to Counting Kryptofreaks. This time we're going to take a look at the 16th episode of Season 3. This one is called Crisis, and nobody get too excited because you'd think maybe they would have saved that title just in case they had eventually been crazy enough to do a DC Comics-esque Crisis like the Arrowverse would do so many years later. But of course I'm saying that in hindsight. Anyway, out of 200 episodes, we actually have one called Crisis, and it's about a relatively minor crisis, at least in the grander scheme of the universe. Yet another Lana is almost dead episode, or actually does die at the beginning of the episode, and then of course we're not going to leave it that way, even though a lot of us at this point of the series might have really appreciated that. If you're watching live, thanks so very much for being here. We're going to get the episode started here in just a minute, and if you're watching after the fact, thanks for doing that as well. This is, I think, kind of a middle-of-the-road sort of episode. It's one of the more sci-fi-esque episodes of the season and and really maybe the series at large. We do a lot of stuff with like grander sci-fi ideas at large, but this is much more of a kind of like sci-fi procedural type episode. It's very Star Trek in certain ways, and I'll talk about that as we get in it, and it has the right director at the helm, I guess, for that sort of an episode. So anyway, if you're going to watch it with me, and I encourage you to do that, make sure to get your episode rigged up however you want to watch it, DVD, Blu-ray, Hulu, get the timestamp 0, and get ready to press play when I say now, and I am just about to do that. Here we go. Once again, it's episode 16 of Season 3. This is our first kind of toe dip into time travel with this show. We're going to get started right away. Let me also say real quick, actually, if you want to help me count things, especially at the end, if you see that I've missed anything, you can take a look at the description, and a list of all of the things in the various tiers that I count on this show are there, and we'll see what interesting and repeated tropes and things we find in this particular episode. I see AMC there in the comments. Hayden Spring is there. Hi, guys. How you doing? We're going to go ahead and start this episode. If you need a timestamp, mention it in the comments there, and hopefully I or somebody else can help you out. We'll go ahead and get started right now. Everybody, please press play right now. So I don't know if this is a record or not, but we get the name of the episode in dialogue 7 seconds into this one, which I think is hilarious. We also get a youth center right away, which immediately makes it feel more like Power Rangers, and this seems like a set maybe we should have had that we went to more often. Once again, we've got this kind of repeated, and I don't know, maybe I should have been counting the episode title in the episode as a thing. We've even got it right there in the background right now, written on a wall. Crisis, because we're at a teen crisis hotline. We always like to do kind of multiple things with our episode title, double entendres and such. And so at first it looks like this might be an episode about teenagers that call a suicide hotline, and then it turns out to be again much more of a broader, grander sci-fi premise where it's about a less existential threat than that. Less internal conflict, more external conflict. But anyway, yeah, maybe I should have been counting that all along. I think a big misstep at the beginning of this is that we actually see Lana outside of the phone. I think it would have been interesting to stay from Clark's perspective this whole time, and this is a provocative enough teaser, but we see too much. It's too gimmicky. It's holding your hand a little too much, I think, and playing it much more like a horror film than I think it needs to. Oh no, Lana has been shot and she's dead. What's going to happen? I mean, you can't really impress anybody with that. You know that she's going to make it. You know she's not going to actually be dead. So wouldn't it be a lot more interesting if we just heard all of the clues that are going to matter later on for the time travel shenanigans, and if we were able to piece it together along with Clark through the episode instead of seeing what he doesn't see. Sometimes we'll go into too many different POVs in this show, and I don't really care for that. AMC, the premise of this episode really reminds me of something from a Twilight Zone episode. Yeah, I agree with that. This one is directed by Kenneth Biller, who is one of the not as strong writers, I think, on Star Trek Voyager, and was the showrunner in the last season of that show, which was a mistake, I think. I've always blamed him for a lot of the mistakes with that season, because at that point, Paramount didn't really care what, or the network, the studio, I should say, because that show wasn't on a network, didn't really care what they were doing. They could have finally been more serialized in that show, and he really squandered a lot of one-off, pointless, bad episodes. And he is not a great writer. I don't know if he directed any of that show. I was kind of surprised to see his name as director here and not writer, because it feels like one of his scripts in a lot of ways. But like I said, he's kind of appropriate for this, because in a lot of ways this feels like it could have also been a Voyager episode. There's a DS9 episode that's kind of like this. I think it's called, it's season 6 or 7, I think it's called The Sound of Her Voice, where there's a time dilation thing where Sisko is talking to a woman who he doesn't realize is actually from the future and has been dead for like 27 years or something. And this is not as interesting as that idea, and doesn't have the same kind of exciting, surprising, and sad, tragic twist at the end. But it does have a decent sense of intrigue, and it handles the time travel thing okay, I suppose. Throughout this, just like I've been talking about with a lot of the season, there's a nice sense of foreboding and suspense through a lot of this. I like the way it's shot quite a bit. I think Biller actually does an okay job as director this episode. This particular scene, I want to complain about the sheriff even being here, because... Oh, a minute ago, I was about to complain about, once again, Pete Ross. They're looking for him to give him something to do. If only he had been at the crisis hotline through more of this season. There's a lot of that where it's like, oh, you know, maybe this person should have been doing something, having some sort of a hobby or job stuff or whatever. So we'll just say that he's been at this hotline. Or a few episodes ago, we'll say that he's been racing cars. It's the same problem as, wouldn't it be nice if we introduced characters who would be a major part of an episode that, like, go to the high school and things like that, as like smaller background characters in earlier episodes, or give them occasional little things to do before they just show up out of nowhere and then everybody pretends like they've been there all along. But with the sheriff, she's like, look, we can't come calling every time there's a crank call. I'm like, then how come you're there? Why didn't you send an officer or a deputy or something? This is going to be another one of those cases where Clark is a terrible liar and nobody presses the issue, because if they did, then we wouldn't have a show, and they might find out too quickly that Clark has superpowers. I don't know that we've done this with hearing specifically before, though, where in this moment he hears something in the background that only dogs would be able to hear or something, and Chloe says, right now, how did you hear that? And he'll give a real pathetic response. I missed too many Linkin Park concerts. He's basically saying that every other teenager has their eardrums all whacked out because they listen to their music too loud. He was actually just dissing both of the other teenagers in the room. A $5 super chat from Eileen. Thanks very much. Who else saw Lana on Reacher? Does she even age? Yeah, Kristen Couric is aging really gracefully. Absolutely. And I haven't seen her in much besides the occasional interview in a long time. But she just appeared recently. This will date this commentary, of course, on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast. And I've not watched that episode yet, but I probably will. And I just saw a thumbnail for that, and yeah, she looks wonderful. She's got to be, what, in her mid-40s? I think she's around Tom Welling's age, maybe a little bit younger. I never saw the Beauty and the Beast reboot that she was in, so I haven't really seen her. And I haven't seen Reacher. I didn't know she was in that. Interesting. I liked, if we're talking about the Jack Reacher thing, I like the initial movie that came out several years ago now. I saw that in the theater, but I haven't seen anything since. Metron is a thing that I should have counted as a DC reference, although not a blatant DC reference, certainly, because that's not a thing that necessarily everybody would know about. I really like, as I often do, the Lex and Lionel stuff most. In this particular episode, Lex is trying to get involved in, surprisingly kind of, Lionel's pet project, or what we think is initially a pet project, in trying to bring people back from the dead. He finally comes right up to Lionel and says, I know what you've been doing. I know what's going on with the Atom thing, that you've been resurrecting people. And Lionel thinks that he is trying to trap him in some way, and he's gonna say, you know, I appreciate your moralizing, and Lex will say, in Rosenbaum's best line this episode, I think, or best delivery, no, I want you to put me in charge of it, in charge of the project. And I think the reason is because it's another way for Lex to try to get closer to his father. If he can prove that he has the same sense of ruthlessness, that he's willing to break all the rules, that he doesn't care about the law, maybe he can finally get some kind of affection from his father, which is a thing, of course, that he's been after the whole series, and he is kind of desperate for, even at the same time as he doesn't trust his father, and more he's you know, kind of like the relationship he's having with Clark, only a little bit backwards, where he doesn't trust him, but he wants so badly for them to be able to put their differences aside, and for his father to be proud of him. And it's been a while since we've really dealt very much with that, because they've been so adversarial lately. And this is kind of maybe a last-ditch effort before his father will finally just go right up against him and throw him completely under the bus, which is what happens at the end of this episode. And I like the tete-a-tete and the politics with all of that, where Lionel's going to turn all of that around on him and say, oh, well, if you want to run this project, you can have it now, as Lex says later at the 11th hour, when he's been found out, or at least this project has been discovered by the authorities, and that what they're doing is very much not above board, and all this stuff I like a lot. This is where I think John Glover's hair is at its most awesome. I have grown my hair out quite a bit now, hoping to get it to look as close to this as possible. And mine's just not, it curls like Lionel's, but it's not quite the thickness of that. So once again, showing his crazy ruthlessness, telling Dr. Tang that she's got to clear out of Dodge, or he's going to send her back to Korea, because he is just an absolute horrible human being. And now we're going to release Adam so that we can finally write him out of the show, because, like with so many things, the producers did not know what exactly to do with him when they decided that the love affair with Lana wasn't working. This will happen again next season with Jason Teague. And they gotta stop doing that. It's weird, like, they knew this was a misstep in bringing in this guy that was supposed to be a honest-to-God love interest for Lana, and then they mix him up too much in the mythology. They go a little bit too far with the mythology and write themselves in holes that are difficult to dig out of, and they kind of lose sight of characters a little bit. And then the very next season, they're going to make the exact same mistake once again. AMC will cap, you'll be seeing more Kristen Kurek on Video Game Mania when you get to Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li. I totally forgot about that. I'm now kind of looking forward to that. So yeah, with the exception of the overarching story and the relationship dynamic with Lex and Lionel, this is going to be a very plot-driven, very kind of thriller, you know, sci-fi thriller kind of episode, described by the producers in the Season 3 companion as kind of a box episode. and an episode that that Biller and Kelly Solders and who else was involved in this episode? Brian Peterson, Solders and Peterson writing on this one didn't seem to be as unhappy with his last episode, but still didn't think it was necessarily their best work. It seems like they're just trying to write themselves out of the Atom thing here and make the episode as entertaining as humanly possible, which I think they achieve pretty well. I like this episode a lot more than, or at least I find it more fun to watch than last episode. I think it comes together better. I think the whole thing makes more sense than that episode did, and isn't as or at least in characterization and stuff doesn't feel as formulaic and as been there, done that, and even not as derivative. The phone call from the future thing is a fun idea. It's real provocative. Once again, it's going to be because of kryptonite. My big question to ask Jarrell when we get to heaven this week, go ahead and mention right now, is Jarrell aware of all of the properties of kryptonite? Does he know if you irradiate it and you mix it with literally anything you can think of, it has like 9 billion different kinds of properties? And is that the reason that he's basically godlike when he starts doing things himself, like being able to affect quantum reality with time travel in season 5 and stuff like that? Is it because of his technology that where you can't see the difference between the tech and magic? Or is he actually using kryptonite irradiated and mixed with various different elements and none of us knew about it? That would really clear a lot of stuff up, wouldn't it? And my questions for Jarrell don't always have to do specifically with Jarrell, but I was excited that this time I came up with one. So Clark is going to spend this whole episode trying to piece together what is going to happen to Lana in the future, and he's got just a day to figure that out and get to the phone call. And more or less everything that happened the first time around in the initial timeline will happen again, but not exactly as it did, and of course Lana's not going to die. So this suggests that in this particular continuity, you have the paradox thing where something happens in the future that hasn't happened yet and affects the past, but that you can change things, and that you have multiple timelines. At first, it really watches like maybe it's going to be a closed loop where it always happens that way. But then there are some minor details with the ending, besides the fact, of course, that Lana makes it out, where it's clear that it's not happening exactly the same way as it did first time out. And it's talked about in the compendium, or the companion rather, that what Clark does throughout this episode kind of doesn't really matter because we wind up in the same place at the end. But that doesn't seem to be true because he's got to get himself positioned to where he's going to be to save Lana at the end of this, and knowing where she is and everything. So his investigation does matter. He just doesn't manage to stop everything before the phone call happens. And then I guess the question is, could he have even gone that far? Like, is it possible that you could have changed the timeline that much? Or is it the kind of time travel where the universe finds kind of an entropy, where it more or less ends up in the same place it was going to in the first place, but with minor differences? But then it doesn't seem to be that, because once again, Lana living or dying doesn't seem to be a minor thing. AMC is still talking about the Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li. So this is one of those cases where the B story is more interesting than the A story, but they are very much related and converge really well, so it doesn't feel like you're watching two different episodes. And that does happen a lot with Smallville, where you'll end up with two very unrelated stories that might superficially converge, but aren't really, all that related. Maybe they're like slightly thematically related, or maybe all roads lead to the same place by the end, but the stories don't have much to do with each other until we get there. This is not that. It is thematically and plot-wise all interconnected. I wonder what that painting is that Lionel has in the hallway and how much money he paid for it. So Lex is not having any of Lionel's crap right now, and Lex does not realize that Lionel is about to turn things around massively on him and get the law involved and blame him for all of the massive lawbreaking that he's been doing through the season with his genetic engineering. And not that the law is going to find out about all of that exactly, but there's this, messed up project, and Adam, this kid, has been kidnapped, and Lex is going to be blamed for all of that stuff. And I really like that look from John Glover, where retroactively, once you know what he's planning in that moment, you realize that that's a look that says, I didn't want to have to go this far, but if it's between me and my son, I'm gonna pick me. And I'm wondering if at this point he thinks that there's still any hope. Well, I guess he does, because he's moving Dr. Tang, and he's planning on continuing the research, so he hasn't given up yet. We're gonna find out that he's dying, and the episode tells us that twice. Once, Lionel explaining it to a new doctor that or a new scientist that he's hired. We go to the hospital. Just way too much in the show. And once, at the very end, to confirm that he wasn't lying there. And at first I thought that was a double beat, and then I thought, this is Lionel Luthor we're talking about. We're never supposed to trust anything he's saying. And I think that the show also very often, or at least sometimes, will take advantage of the viewer with that and try to use the fact that we can't ever know if he's lying or not as an excuse to retcon stuff. OAW, yes, finally caught a live count in Kryptofreaks. Welcome. How's it going, man? So, this woman's husband, who's got the cell phone that Clark's got to go track down. Again, he's trying to piece everything together. So this is going to be the phone that Lana will use in the future, and not just a few hours in the future. This guy is a heating and cooling contractor guy, and his first name is Len. And that might have just been a name they picked out of a hat, or it's possible that that's the namesake of Lin Wein, one of course, the major editors at DC and writer on DC stuff, including some Superman things. It's kind of rare that we go to a first name, though. So I could absolutely be reaching with that. And that's not a thing that I've been counting, although I could call it a DC reference. Again, not a blatant one, certainly. I like the detail of the wheel up against the van before he drives off. That's pretty good. Adam is, I guess, made as sympathetic as finally he is going to be. He's just desperate to stay alive. I don't fully understand the 12-hour thing. I got the impression that he wasn't always getting the injections that he needs, and that's the reason that he's in so much agony all the time, where he'll be kind of thrown away in the cell in that laboratory, and just, running up against his own second death, he'll finally get an injection from Dr. Tang. Okay, this moment is hilarious, because the writers do not know how to write Clark out of this, so it just cuts, and we have to imagine, I don't know, he starts walking down the highway, and then waits until he's far enough away from that guy so he can super speed back, or waits for his back to be turned. Like, it's so awkward, and I kind of expected a commercial break right there. So that, because Smallville does this thing quite a bit too, and just wait till we get to the Double Lex with Black Kryptonite episode. I forget what that's called, because that episode, it's on the tip of my tongue, because that episode has the worst example in the whole series of this, but I really thought it was going to be that whole thing, where it's like, let's cut the commercials so that everybody will not think about how there's no real way out of this situation in a very, swift kind of way. I think that's so funny, where he's just awkwardly walking backwards. I really need this guy to turn away at some point. Adam is a whole bunch of different things in this episode. He's almost a Kryptofreak, but he doesn't have kryptonite powers, and I've probably said that before. But he is also... Ooh, I love the color of Lex's shirt in this scene. I want that shirt. I wear a lot of button-ups, and I have a lot of purple, but I don't have exactly that shade. Or at least, it looks great in this lighting. Rosenbaum wears purple wonderfully well. But anyway, he serves as sort of a Kryptofreak, but he's also a Lana stalker. And I guess he's kind of been that before. And he's almost a Chloe killer. He's also, I'm just listing a lot of things that we're going to be counting later, but he's also a bad guy who dies. And he's responsible for one of Clark's parents getting hurt. So even though the episode itself doesn't watch super formulaic and not as formulaic as the last episode, it has a lot of the tropes that we count in this. The lighting in this episode is particularly good. A lot of Hitchcocky-esque shots. Gee, I'm so shocked that that's happening. That's a horrible line when Chloe says, "I'm not her keeper." Like, there's a few of those this episode where characters seem to be talking a little bit out of character. I don't love the makeup job here. Maybe it's just the resolution on this projector versus what it would have looked like on TV. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's like higher def so you can see too much of it, but it's a little unrealistic. It doesn't look enough like actual blood to me. Brian, do you have a favorite Kryptofreak? Mine is, as far as just overall Kryptofreaks, like, you know, bad guys and good guys, I'll go with Ryan, even though I still don't know where his powers came from, and if he had, and if he was actually affected by kryptonite, but he's one of the most likable guest stars in the whole show, and I tear up at the end of his death episode every time. It's just wonderful. I really like the, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. The guy in the first season with, I think it's called is it Transference? I'm rusty, it's been a while. But the kid that gets Clark's powers, who's Iceman from X-Men, because that guy's a good actor, and it's a really nice mirror of Clark with a terrible upbringing and what Clark might have been if he'd had the wrong parents. So a couple of my favorites, but all the best Kryptofreaks I think are real early. I also like the woman that sees the future and sees Lex as president. Unusual to see Jonathan Kent with a gun, but real appropriate here. He's protecting his house and his family and Lana, although not doing a particularly good job of it, because he just got knocked out and got his gun stolen from him. I guess I don't know of a much better way he could have handled that, except to just maybe stay in the house. Maybe he didn't need to leave. It actually would have been probably smarter if he had just waited for whoever was in that truck to come out of that truck. So never mind. No, that was a bad move, Neil. Yeah, I don't totally know why he did that. Sean Ashmore, thanks. And I know his name, it just wasn't coming to me in the moment. Still weird that you then get Aaron Ashmore as a regular character for a whopping 4 seasons, or 3, who looks exactly like that kid. Who was in, well, I guess 2 episodes. I guess he does come back later, doesn't he? In a 2-parter, in the second part of a 2-parter, when Lex is thrown into an insane asylum. Another episode with maybe better visual execution than the script itself, where we're not phoning in the production while we are a little bit phoning in stories, just trying to get to the next place we need to get to. I feel like this police officer is an actor that I've seen in other things. but I can't put my finger on what exactly. He might have been, I want to say maybe Enterprise or maybe 24 or something, but it's also possible that I just remember him from this show, and that's all I'm thinking about. So yeah, this is an unfortunate moment for Lex. We're going to kind of call back to and parallel this again later on when, at the end of the season, I think, when Lionel finally gets arrested himself for some of the same things that Lex is being grabbed for here. It's always a nice effect to have the lightning flash as hard as it always does when there's a storm in this show, and particularly in the manner, but of course it's not especially realistic. The lightning is always so insanely close in this show. I kept expecting somebody to say, like, we've got to evacuate the mansion or evacuate the town or something, because this storm seems like it must be worse than it actually is, given how insanely close and how frequent the lightning is. Because it looks too much like the tornado that we had at the end of season 1, and it's like, oh man, we've got another horrible storm. Oh, it's not actually about a really bad storm. I mean, that's gonna, affect story a little bit, because Lana's gonna be in the middle of that whole thing, but not in the same way that cliffhanger did. But yeah, I bet, man, actor names just are not coming to me today. Somerhalder. I bet Ian Somerhalder did not imagine that he was going to end up being the bad guy in his last episode of the show, and that he was going to be reduced to Lana Stalker. He probably figured he'd get killed somewhere, but maybe not like this. This was the only thing that I had seen him in before Lost, where he plays Boone, and he's quite good in that show. Somebody asked me today if I've ever seen any Vampire Diaries, which, of course, is the major thing now that he's known for, a show that he was on for 6,000 years. And no, I've never seen that. Did not look like my kind of thing. Looked like a real typical CW drama. Kind of like this show. Show's not always typical. I maintain my love-hate relationship. Well, she tried. And then she got knocked unconscious. Oh, not unconscious. Decently choreographed action this episode. Again, often going to horror places, which is counterintuitive in a Superman thing, but by this point, audiences would be very used to that, and would be one of the things that kept a lot of people coming back. And this season in particular, super atmospheric, real somber and bleak in places, and a lot of real deliberate pacing in these kind of moodier episodes this season. After this, we're going to start getting back into more heavy mythology stuff. Kryptonian mythology stuff. Brian, will Counting Kryptofreaks also span Supergirl and Superman and Lois? Not Supergirl. I don't know if I could stomach all of that show on an episode-to-episode basis, but it just gets real bad. But if I get there, I would certainly consider doing it with Superman and Lois. I don't want to promise anything. I'm having a hard enough time getting this show out. But thanks so much for spending the hour with me. I like Kristen Kurick's line delivery there, where she goes up the stairs and hits the dead end. That's real authentic. We're getting a little bit more Power Ranger Lana here. And even though we've given Pete something to do, we still have to write him out of most of the episode because we don't know how to involve him in the story any farther than establishing a location for the episode to begin. So we all should have known that kryptonite was going to be the thing that creates the time travel. Never mind how that works. I mean, we've seen it mixed with water before, and it hasn't caused a quantum anomaly, but this time, somehow. So while Summerholder's character seems to be Adam, sort of a Kryptofreak, the real Kryptofreak this episode is Power Lines. AMC, apparently the sheriff was a Bertinelli in Arrow. I don't remember that. Was she really? Or are you talking about... Are you talking about Sheriff Adams? Or are you talking about one of the other police officers this episode? Because that would be weird. Well, he's not picking up because he's busy saving your life. See, if... the thing you have to remember is that... See, everything Lana's doing with this phone call is wrong. First of all, you have to remember that when he picked up before, he couldn't get to you. I mean, he didn't know where you were yet, but I don't know what makes you think he can get you there... he can get there fast enough. And when you get to the end of the episode, she's going to be surprised and wonder how he got there so fast. And once again, he's going to have the worst lie imaginable. The companion goes on and on about how cool this bullet time scene is, and it's better than some others. Certainly, it doesn't look as fake and as horribly TV. It kind of helps that it's in the dark. But it's still not quite as good as they're making it out to be. I don't think even in 2004, when, I believe, when this episode would have aired. So yeah, like, everything Clark did does matter, because... Although, I guess it's weird because his knocking over that telephone pole is why the call goes to the past in the first place. Okay, so this is a weird... I may have been wrong about what I said earlier. This ends up being a weirder kind of paradox, right? Because he makes the call go backwards in the first place in saving her, so that he can get the call to then be able to save her. But there had to have been a timeline where she died because we physically see that happen? So then I'm thinking, are we in, like, the sort of the third timeline now? I don't know. That's kind of interesting. It would be really ambiguous if we didn't see her die in the first place and we just heard the call. And then you could sort of say that a lot of the episode at that point doesn't really matter because he was always going to save her at the end, and that now we're just seeing how exactly that happened. But that doesn't mean that there's no reason to make it, I guess, because there's still always that question of, well, if you just sat around and did nothing, like, it ends up being that destiny versus free will thing, which the show is all about. Of, would it have happened because it has to happen, or because of a choice he made? And if he was always going to make that choice, then there's the question of, is that destiny or not? And so, at the beginning of the episode, Lionel throws Lex into the bus. At the end of the episode, Lex turns that around and says, okay, fine, I'm finally going to cave. I've got all the evidence that I need to get my father behind bars. And that's a lot of why I say that he, in desperation, offered to run the resurrection program. I love that line reading. Rosenbaum kills it this episode. And I mean, he always does. Just the intensity of that is killer. I forgot how late this happens, so we're going to have... I'm just fixated on this painting now. We're going to have Lionel reveal that he's sick and that he's dying and that that's the reason that he has been working on this program. It's interesting how late, and I actually really appreciate this, it's interesting how late in the season we get this. We don't know Lionel's motivations. We just think he's a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling bad guy who could make millions of dollars on this project, or maybe just because, like Lex, he's curious about the universe and wants to know everything he can know for the sake of just generically power, and it's actually because he doesn't want to die and can't deal with his own mortality. And also interesting, I just thought of this, that Lionel, I wish we'd been keeping track of all the random books that Clark and Lana read throughout this series. That would be fun too. Because she's reading a book about time travel, and there's a whole bunch of examples of just random things related to the story that Clark reads, where, like, he goes through an adventure, and then to understand more about it, now he's reading. There's one where he's reading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, etc., etc. But anyway, it's interesting that at the beginning of the season, there's a suggestion that Lex... I'm pretty sure it's the beginning of this season, yeah, when he's on the island, there's a suggestion that Lex might have actually gotten superpowers after all from the kryptonite in the meteor shower, and that he is, if not immortal, he can't be, easily killed or get disease or anything. And then his father is dying and can't deal with his own mortality, while Lex is wondering just how mortal he is. So that's cool. So like I said earlier, she's going, hey, how'd you get there that fast? And he's like, well, it must have been the time travel. Which, of course, she doesn't buy, and we're in this circular discussion and argument we constantly have with these characters. I mean, I'm glad that they're at least getting along a little bit better right now, but it feels like we're still in this holding pattern. There's not really a character arc in this episode. It's much more of a standard sci-fi episodic, one-off. There's a problem that an external problem that we have to solve, and how are we going to figure out the the science and solve it. The closest thing we get is what Lana just said, that she is that maybe she doesn't have to be as afraid as she is in thinking that her whole life is planned out for her, and she doesn't really have a choice in anything, and they've just proven that the future is not set. And I don't mind that line. I like that they took something from it. It's not exactly a character arc, but it leads to one potentially if you can stretch to a degree that this episode has anything to do with her going to Paris later. And it could. And I didn't remember that being seeded this way, and I don't even know if that's intentional, but it reads that way to some degree. So that's kind of nice. I love this office. I wish I could have it. I love glass. I love glass everything. I've got a glass desk. I have a lot of glass shelves. I wish I had as much glass as Lionel does. It's funny. I don't mean to be trying to pattern my life off of an evil man in wanting his hair and his office, but I think I actually would like to have Lionel's office even more than Lex's, and I've always thought about trying to set up a space in my house, if I ever could, to look like Lionel's place. I've got a space in the bunker, or to Lex's, but now I think I kind of want Lionel's. I've got enough space in the bunker that I could, if money were no object, I could do a thing like that, but I like what I've got. And Lionel wouldn't have arcade machines. So this was not in the script, and is the best thing in the episode, I think, where... And I love how, scraggly he's looking, and he looks 20 years older than he did last scene. And this is how in the episode, Lionel knows that he can't continue his resurrection project, and he's not going to be able to use Clark's blood to keep him alive, and so he's going to commit suicide. And then the very beginning of, I said the end of the season, maybe the end of that scene is the cops come in and take him to prison. I cannot remember if that happens here or if that happens toward the end of the season. I guess we'll find out. It's been a while since I watched these. But I do remember it's a little bit awkward. So I do really appreciate the choice there to end on that kind of a cliffhanger. And I think it's really organic. All roads lead there. It's really shocking to me that that's not in the script, and that's a choice they made on the day, actually shooting a different episode, and then they decided to put that there, and it follows wonderfully. I mean, he has no other recourse, and he's going to die. He has a terminal illness in his liver, and he's going to have to either let that take its course or go ahead and kill himself. And it's wonderfully bleak, and it goes really well with just the darkness of this season. And then it's undercut a little bit at the beginning of next episode by this weird lack of continuity where Lionel's not holding that gun anywhere close to where he left it on his face. That's what I remember. We'll see if I'm remembering that right when we get to the next episode, which is the second and last, sadly, of course, appearance by Christopher Reeve. That's Legacy, where we're going to get back to the Kryptonian stuff, and we're actually going to have a scene with Christopher Reeve and John Glover, which is exciting. And it's not anything like as good of an episode as Rosetta, but, of course, Reeve is always good, and I'm really glad that he agreed to be in this episode, or in the show again, and that we got to see him one more time before he passed away. And there's discussion about Swan's passing in the very next season. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to the count. I still haven't put together the full count yet. I just haven't gotten to it. So we'll go ahead and mention all of the things that I noticed this episode, and some things, again, that I'm not regularly counting, but kind of wish maybe I was, or just fun to point out. So we have a Kryptofreak kind of in the phone line. So not actually a Kryptofreak this episode. Adam is closer to a Kryptofreak in that he is a standard, I guess recurring in this case, but he's kind of a standard bad guy in, putting Clark's parents in danger and stalking Lana and almost killing Chloe, and then finding out that Clark has powers at the end, and so he's got to go. But I like to refer to him more as a Clarktofreak, because he was able to stay alive, and he was resurrected by Clark's blood. And so Clark's blood is the stand-in for kryptonite, so he's a Clarktofreak. I don't know if we have any other Kryptofreaks. He might have the distinction of being the only one of those. And then, like I said, I kind of wish we were counting titles and dialogue. I think we would have a track record of the majority, because they're one-word episode titles. I bet the majority of episodes, maybe in this show, have the name of the episode somewhere in dialogue. We've got a rude super speed exit with the woman in the hospital with glasses, whose husband's name is Len, which again might be a Len Wein reference, but I don't know if that's a DC reference or not. Certainly not an in-continuity reference. But another kind of off-the-beaten-path reference, this might be a reference to Lois, I'm not sure, when Chloe says that the truck is her cousin's, when she's talking to Adam in her office. And this is not the first reference we've gotten to a cousin, and we know that she has a cousin named Lois, and then in the next season, when we bring in Lois Lane, it will be established for sure that it was indeed Lois Lane that we were talking about, and this might be more intentional setup for that, and we're not too many episodes away from bringing her in, so it might be a backdoor reference to Lois Lane. And then again, parents in danger, bullet time, and a bad guy death, so quite a bit in an episode that doesn't feel too horribly standard, but a lot of that, I think, is in the kind of gimmick of the sci-fi premise and in the atmosphere of the episode, of which the season is doing a lot of great stuff with. So anyway, that is the episode, and I think I'm going to give this one, I'm somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3 on this one, but I think just for enjoyment factor and putting it up against the rest of the episodes of the season, I think it's a 3. That might be too generous, but I enjoy this one quite a bit. It's a little bit stretched maybe, and is kind of a serviceable plot episode trying to get us to the next thing, but it is a lot more fun than it ought to be for just being, if not a placeholder episode, a stair-step kind of episode. So yeah, I'll check comments real quick and see if anybody has opinions about this episode that they've shared at the end here, and then we'll go ahead and call it a day. Again, Legacy next time, and that's a more major episode, so that'll be fun for us to watch next time, and seeing the, again, last appearance of Christopher Reeve in this show. Brian, did the show make any DC characters, Kryptofreaks, that aren't from Superman mythology? I could have seen them doing that with Flash. No, not really. I mean, you have some characters that were really ambiguous about how they get their powers, where they could be Kryptofreaks or not. You have that with the case of next season, we'll get their version of Mixelplick, which I think is kind of lame. And he functions like a Kryptofreak, but we don't actually know where he got his powers. I don't think they come right out and say that it's kryptonite. If they did, that would be the only one I can think of. But even that, I don't think we did for sure. So yeah, Kryptofreaks are always made up characters as far as I'm aware. I can't think of any instances where they're not. AMC, yeah, Sheriff Adams was a future member of the Bertinelli crime family in the future, depicted in that attempted backdoor pilot Green Arrow and the Canaries. She's in that? She's in the penultimate episode of Arrow? Wow. I can't even see that. I can't imagine that actress play, because like she doesn't seem Italian or anything. That's interesting. AMC, I'm with you, Cap. I've always really liked the stained glass in the Luthor Mansion. His hair is quite epic as well. He's one of the only actors that or people that I've ever seen pull off a long lion-esque mane like that, and get away with it, and well into old age. He is not follically challenged, that man. He's got to be in his... See, I hate to say this and be wrong. I would be surprised if Glover wasn't in his 70s by now, right? Let's look this up. I'm curious. And he's still got a full head of hair, as far as I'm aware. By the way, once again, we'll date this commentary, but he definitely wants to be in the Smallville animated series that Rosenbaum and Tom Welling are talking about. Let's see how old Mr. Glover is. I've seen John Glover in person one time. I didn't actually meet him, but I was at a convention where he did a panel and got to listen to him talk, and that was great. 77, John Glover. Brian, you should start counting lying to protect people. I mean, that's one of those that you'd have maybe not as often as walking away angry, probably about half of those. I was surprised there wasn't a car crash this episode. It sure looked like when we introduced Jonathan Kent's truck that there's going to be, and there's a number of places where there could have been a car crash and there wasn't, because you would have thought there might have been one with the truck, although we crash Jonathan Kent's truck so often, I can't say John Kent because that's a character now, that you wonder how he ever affords to buy new ones. Like, his trucks are like Shuttlecraft and Voyager. He apparently has no trouble with money, even though we do episodes about how he's having money troubles. But, I forget what we were talking about. Anyway, AMC, also you should count the eclectic selection books that pop up throughout the series. He must have said that before I said it. Yeah, I was also thinking that we should have done that. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, folks. Really hope you enjoyed this commentary, and I'll be back in at least 2 weeks. I think next Wednesday night I have something else going on. But oh yeah, I'm gonna see the Batman next Wednesday. So I won't be able to do Kryptofreaks that day, but I will be back again in at least 2 weeks for another one, unless I find some other magical place to work it in. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan. Happy counting, and I'll see everybody again real soon with lots more stuff here on Geekvolution. If you're watching this in the moment, join me tomorrow night for another Captain Logan show. We're gonna have Jonathan Ying of Heroes of the Grid, the Power Rangers board game, that game, and he's going to come talk to me about Power Rangers, come hang out with us, and help me try to make that show as big as we can to give him a big warm welcome. And in the meantime, once again,